Okay, this is part two of our interview with Lael Johnston. And let's go back to apparently there's some funny shit in this story that needs to be said. So here we are again, and please continue.
Yeah, no, we were talking about Australia. And then the other interesting thing about that was at the time, you guys are probably hip to the Instrumentalist magazine, right? I don't know if they're still publishing it, but at the time it was a thing. And there'd been an ad in that magazine that the school districts in Brisbane were hiring band teachers. And I was like, and you didn't need to have a Bachelor of Education to do this. You know, I thought, oh man, this is freaking perfect. No winter. They speak English. It's a big city. I could get a job. This is perfect, you know. So that was kind of the incentive that to go there. I stayed with that cat, Doug Shue, for like the Central Band landed in Cairns, and we hung out there for a few days. And then we went to Brisbane, and then that's when I disconnected with the Central people, and I hung out with Doug Shue. And then it turned out that that whole possibility of being a band teacher there was kind of jive, because I got an interview and the fellow said, yeah, we probably shouldn't have ran that ad because it's really complicated to hire people who aren't Australians. I thought, yeah, now you tell me.
You might have wanted to include that in the fine print.
And then Doug Shue had a younger guy, because Doug was older than me. I would have been 32 or 30. I was 34. And Doug Shue would have been at least 10 years older than me. And he had a former trumpet student or a friend of his that was around my age that was quite busy as a trumpet player in Sydney. And so Doug connected me with this guy, and I went and I stayed with him, and I hung out in Sydney, and the guy got me on a gig or two. And then on the way home, because I'd been to university with a cat from Fiji, I visited my friend in Fiji. Yeah, Epi. I visited my friend in Fiji on the way home. The whole thing was a bit of a bust in terms of finding a job, but what a great trip, you know.
Well, I'm going to ask then, Lael, since you took it upon yourself to get a master's degree, was there ever any, like what Greg said about wanting to have a career in post-secondary, did you ever think about that too, considering you decided to go on to a second degree afterwards? Or what was the motivation for the master's degree?
Well, I think, you know, as, oh God, I don't remember why.
Didn't see that one coming now, did you?
No, you know what? I really, coming out of my undergrad, I really wanted to be a timpanist, with an orchestra somewhere. That was my main goal. But also, like at that time, you know, a lot of the cats around Calgary, so like Mike Schuett, so he was at Mount Royal, right? And had gotten that gig with the Masters, right? I think he had done his graduate work in Toronto. But there was lots of guys, you know, who had managed to get themselves into that post-secondary world just with the Masters, right? So I do know that was definitely kind of in the back of my mind as maybe, you know, a second plan if getting with the Berlin Phil didn't work out. But
right.
But I think also too, in my final year of my undergrad, Linda Pimentel, who was running the percussion studio there, she went on sabbatical for my last term, and instead of hiring someone to come in, the faculty actually hired me, right? So I was running the percussion department there in my final year, which, you know, led me to have this delusion that I must have the ability to get a university gig, right? And then when I actually did apply for I came off the road. I was playing with a country band. Actually, I forgot about this. So the reason why I actually kind of ended up back in Calgary was the position. So Linda retired, right? And so the percussion spot there at Lethbridge came open. And so I quit the road. I left this country band that I was working with and spent a good month, trying to get my chops back and orchestral chops, right? And putting together a good portfolio. And I didn't get the gig, right? And which made sense, right? That's Adam Mason got it, right? So
right, who's still there, right?
Still there.
Adam Mason.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's done amazing things with that program, right? So I certainly, I don't begrudged it then, but and yeah, it kind of, when I realized that, you probably were going to have a doctorate to open a lot of those doors at that point. I think that's where I kind of decided, well, maybe the ed degree was a way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, talking about going back to Iowa, Greg, I actually I was seriously looking to do my doctorate in was it Iowa State that you're at?
No, I was at the University of Northern Iowa in Waterloo, but I know about Iowa State. It's a great school.
Yeah. So there was I had this record, and it's so long ago, I've totally forgotten the fellow's name, but I had this crazy record when I was a kid that was just a bunch of orchestra or percussion ensembles playing just weird stuff, right? And the director of it was this guy, and so I Googled him, or probably couldn't have Googled back then. I looked him up in a university directory or something.
Yellow Pages.
He was in Iowa, right? I thought, this is a sign. I'm meant to go study in Iowa. So I connected with him. This was after I'd finished my master's. I was gigging in Edmonton, and had a couple phone conversations with him. But then, and he seemed quite excited for me to come. I was doing a lot of like John Cage and just kind of that real avant-garde percussion stuff, right? Stockhausen, and he was really into that. And then we got talking about what what it would look like while I was down there, and found out that I would probably have to be in charge of drumline, right? And at that time I was like, oh, there's no way I could go down there and be an American drumline type guy. Like, it just seems so bizarre to me, which is funny because then just past decade I've was running a drumline there at Chestermere, right? But
Great.
At that time it was not in my wheelhouse. Didn't
want to be the DCI master.
I hated those guys.
You missed a golden opportunity at Iowa State, because when I was in Northern Iowa at Cedar Falls, which is like, right next door to, it's like Chestermere to Calgary, Cedar Falls to Waterloo. And the jazz band director would organize these little trips. And we actually did a reciprocal gig to Iowa State to go play with their jazz band in a pub. And then they came to Waterloo and Cedar Falls or whatever and played a concert with us. And when we went to Iowa State, the jazz band director warned us. He said, okay, there's this saxophone player in their band with Tourette's.
No.
And he drops the F word.
Excellent.
Don't acknowledge it. Don't laugh. Don't say anything. So yeah, try not to laugh when somebody's like, in between tunes dropping the F-bomb. It was pretty funny. That was my first experience with Tourette's.
Obviously a memorable one.
It's pretty funny.
I had when I was doing my undergrad down in Lethbridge, it's really weird. There's all these musical theater groups in Lethbridge. Like, at the time, I don't know what it's like now, but at the time there was like these four companies that would put on these big productions, right? And they would hire locally the musicians for the pit, and you were always guaranteed a couple rehearsals, and then generally like a 2-week run, right? And they paid well. Like I think even back then it was, you know, $75 a night or something like that. But you know, and as a university student, it was gold, right? And there'd be 4 that would run through the year. Anyway, so there's a bunch of us that were kind of the regular calls, and there's this bass player. His name was Keith Landry, and I think he ended up doing an engineer degree and becoming like a rocket scientist or something. But bright guy, but really, really, really funny too. And we had taken this gig to do it was Anna Green Gables. So, you know, very, very friendly family thing. And it was a newer company called the Star Singers. And, you know, we didn't know anything about it. We just took the gig, right? Because it was the money. And we show up, and it's like a bunch of kids, right? And we find out that it's actually a Mormon organization. And anyway, so we do our first rehearsal, and I don't know where Keith got this idea, but after the rehearsal, he goes up to the director and says, you know, I should have told you this. I have Tourette's, and it manifests itself in profanity, and I you know, just wanted to let you know, and I should have let you know earlier, and I, you know, if you want me not to be here, that's okay, right? Because I, you know, I might, you know, be swearing, and it probably wouldn't be good in front of these kids. And the director's like, no, we totally understand. It's totally fine. You don't worry, right? And I think we maybe had, you know, one run through and then the dress rehearsal, right? So we're doing the dress rehearsal, and yeah, every once in a while, Keith just blurts out a profanity. And we're watching the action. All the kids are like staring at and the director's trying to get him not to look at him. And it was horrible, right? Like, and not really funny in our political correct world. But at the time, and then of course the Tourette's magically disappeared during the night of the performance. But so that's my Tourette's story.
Now, when you were at Lethbridge, was Ed Wozniak there? Does that name ring a bell?
Ed Wozniak.
Wozniak? Okay.
Yeah, Wozniak. Yep. I know Ed.
So you know him, Pat?
I do. Yep.
He's retired out here.
Yes, he
lives
has.
in Parksville or Qualicum Beach or something.
Yep. He's the one in about 2008 when I was playing the International Trumpet Guild thing out at the Banff Center that Jens Lindemann put together. I walked into the dining area, the dining room, whatever, and Ed Wozniak was sitting with Don Robb. Do you know that name?
I know the name. I don't believe I've ever met him.
Lael, I bet you remember Don from Lethbridge, probably.
Well,
yeah. So they're sitting together eating, and Ed calls me over and says, do you have your master's degree done? And I said, no, I have 1 year done. I haven't completed the second year. And he said, oh, that's too bad. And I said, why? What's going on? He said, well, the saxophone studio at the University of Lethbridge is coming up. Like they're going to be looking for a new saxophone teacher, but you have to have a master's degree. And I said, well, I mean, I had finished teaching at UC, I think pretty much, or was almost finished teaching at UC for like 13 years. And he said, yeah, that doesn't matter. You need to have a master's degree. So, and I said, okay, well, I guess I'm not your guy then. So, but I don't know if you remember the name Dave Renter, who was a great saxophone player, super nice guy. He had a doctorate degree. And the one thing that I started to learn about universities and stuff is that the new people they were hiring as sessionals, even with masters or doctorates. And he had a DMA from University of Texas at Austin. And I remember having lunch with him in Lethbridge and asking him, so you're probably ready for tenure at this point? And he said, he laughed, and I'm looking at him like, what? And he said, yeah, I'm not being considered for tenure. I mean, they haven't offered me anything. And I said, really? I said, you've been here like 4 or 5 years now or whatever. He said, yeah, I know. He says, yeah, but they're not, tenure's not on my radar by the looks of it. So his wife was teaching at U of L, and she got asked to do a gig down at a college or university in Michigan, and they buggered off. And I think he got a job there too. So he's down in Michigan now. And that's how that thing came up. And Ed approached me about, but because I didn't have a master's degree, didn't work. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's
It's the way of the world.
yeah. So yeah, I came across Ed quite a bit. I mean, he hired me to do some things at U of L, like guest stuff and things like that, and all that. So I maintain contact with him. I haven't since he moved out to the island, but I knew that he had moved out there. He's probably been out there, what, 4 years now? 3, 4 years, 5 years?
Yeah, probably something like that.
Something like that.
I've hung out with him a couple of times. I think he came and he helped out in the Courtney band once or twice.
Yeah. I think he probably would have been at U of L when you were there, Lael. He was a prof in the education department.
Yeah, no, I definitely know the name for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Oh, so he wasn't in music? He was in education?
Yeah, well, music education, but from what I understood,
okay.
He was like, he's a trumpet player, but from what I understood, he was more involved with the education, like the music education part of things, as opposed to like, conductor or whatever, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So
I don't know what it's like now, but back in the day in Lethbridge, like as us music majors, it was really separate from the ed people. It was like there seemed to be at the U of C, there definitely seemed to be more mingling, but yeah, and in fact, I think even most of the music ed profs were in a different building. They were in the ed building.
Mm. Well, and speaking of U of C, you did have some time there. I remember. How were you there 1 year or something and then transferred, or how long was it you were there? Because I remember being there the same time you were.
Yeah, so I did. Came right out of high school and into university, and I had a good first year. Like it was fine, but I think I'd been so focused on just being a drummer from like grade 4, right? And doing Central Memorial, doing the Calgary Youth Orchestra, playing in the Civic Orchestra, playing like that was just everything that I did, right? And I remember kind of having a bit of a epiphany that maybe there was more to life than music. And also I didn't I started hanging out with this girl who was she was an art major, and she just was like super hip and cool, and it's kind of I had never thought of music as art, right? Like it was sort of just this thing that I did, and I was good at it and I enjoyed it, right? But I didn't really understand it as an artistic pursuit, right? It was just it was almost like working at a factory, right? And I know it's after you've been with a symphony for 30 years, feeling like it's factory work is normal, I think. But for I think a 17-year-old to like I was thinking of it just kind of as this weird job, and it just didn't feel right. So I quit, and I took a year of religious studies, I think, trying to find myself. And then I remember no, you know what, I was still in the music program, so that would have been your first year, Pat. I was still hanging out.
I entered UC in the fall of '85.
Yeah, so in my second year, first semester, I think I was still taking some music courses, but I started to kind of take some other stuff. And then remember Malcolm Edwards?
Oh, very well.
Yeah, so he was my advisor, and I just talked to him quite a bit. And I was saying, I don't know what to do with my life, blah blah blah. Making all these decisions when you're 18, and I wanted to take more electives than what they would allow. And I remember him saying, he goes, why don't you transfer into drama? They'll let you do anything you want. So I did 2 years of theater design, or just general drama, but with the idea of, I really got into the stage tech thing. And so I was doing that for like 2 years. And then, but I was always still playing in the still in the wind ensemble and stuff like that, right? So
Mhm.
so that's why, you know, you would have seen me around there. But
Okay.
then, yeah, because remember doing honor band and stuff like that?
Yeah,
Or,
you
yeah,
and I and Neil Lawton up in Edmonton, and
yeah. So I was,
me almost getting us kicked out of the Greenbrier Motel or whatever.
yeah,
Another story in a different day.
but I was in the,
Nothing weird. Nothing, nothing against the law. Just saying.
I was in the drama faculty then, right? But
Okay, I
it
didn't
was
know that.
funny because Vondas Miller there, it got, I was a little bit hated by a lot of those percussionists, because I was Vondas's go-to, right? And I wasn't even in the faculty, right? So,
Well, you were doing the right things then if other percussionists were hating you.
what's that?
I said you were doing the right things if other percussionists didn't like
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, no, there was one poor fellow that, well, we were in high school with Pat, and he was a year older than me, and my entire musical career, I was always, you know, like when I came into grade 10, Eklund took away this guy's section leader position and made me section leader, and then when I got to university, I remember Sylvia Pimentel was the timpanist, right, with the wind ensemble and all that, Linda's daughter. And I remember she broke her leg skiing or something, and so Vondas just yanked me, put me in the you know, in the timpani role, and over top of a bunch of senior percussionists, and they just hated me. But oh well. But
You live to tell about it, so that's okay.
yeah,
There
well,
you go.
yeah, granted, you know, the level of performance was a little weak back then too, right?
Mhm.
But where is it going with that? Oh, so this is where it all comes to the, you know, me getting back into music is, and this is weird how things go. So Vondas put together a professional wind ensemble to do a series of concerts over the summer.
Okay.
And it just happened that it totally correlated to when the Calgary Phil went down. They did it like a big tour that I think this is when they went to New York, and
Yeah, the East Coast. They went. Yeah, I remember that.
So all the percussionists that would have normally have been hired for this summer wind ensemble project, so like, you know, Tim and Tom and Mike, and they were all on tour with the CPO, so they had to get dragged from the bottom of the pile, and so I ended up on these gigs, right?
Every other guy was dead or working, so they had to give you guys.
They had to go get the drama major, and,
right.
and Vondas had brought Linda up to play percussion in this thing, and so me and Linda are in the percussion section together. And she had like, I sort of knew her because she had adjudicated me a bunch of times when I was a kid and all that. And she said, oh, you know, what are you doing, you know? And I said, well, I'm studying to be a stage designer. And she's like, no, like you should be studying percussion. Why don't you come down to Lethbridge and study with me? And
oh, so you were recruited.
Yeah, but you know, it was weird the way things work, because I was dating this gal at the time, and she was actually going down to Lethbridge to study costume design, and I remember I was kind of, it hadn't even dawned on me that, you know, I should follow this girl to Lethbridge, right? Like it was, you know, she was going her way, and maybe things would work out, and then I was like, oh, you know, I kind of like her, and you know, Linda Pimentel thinks I should study percussion. So that's how I ended up down in Lethbridge.
The universe was speaking to you.
Yeah. And you know what, it really was like those, you know, I was able to do my degree down there in 3 years, right? Because I had the 1.5 years from the U of C.
Were you able to transfer a lot of that over, or they accept quite a bit?
Yeah. Like I had like one wonky semester at the U of C with, you know, like I failed like upper strings techniques, like all that stuff. But yeah, so but yeah, Lethbridge was it's such a cool town musically, right? Like just so many opportunities. You got to play with the symphony, all these musicals, gigs galore, right? I lucked out, ended up getting on, with a honky tonk band, like my first week down there. And back then, like believe it or not, you'd make $100 a night playing in the Tabor Saloon, right? 2 nights, sometimes 3 nights. So as a student, it was killer down there.
Yeah, right on.
Now, is Linda still with us?
Yeah. When she retired, she's in Arizona.
Arizona, yeah. We actually are Facebook friends. I imagine she's probably Facebook friends with you too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She huge influence on so many students, and especially in the education world, right? Like it's interesting because when I was studying with her, there had never been a chance that I would have gone into education, right? Like I was bound and determined to be a performer, but
yeah.
So I never got that side of her, right? But I think what was really cool about her was she just had the time that she grew up, and she studied at UCLA, right? So like John Cage was in residence as an artist in residence for one of her semesters, right? So
right on.
Yeah. And who's the Harry Parch? I don't know if that's a guy but another really crazy avant-garde percussionist, and she worked with him.
Wow.
Mitchell Peters, who I think he was the not UCLA, University
USC.
I don't know, or maybe it was at I don't know.
Well,
but Mitch Peters.
There are a few universities down in that area.
Yeah. But Mitchell Peters is like super important percussionist, has written tons of.
Is he like the Ornette Coleman of percussion or something? Or
yeah. Yeah, definitely. But he anyway, she studied with him, and so a lot of pedigree there.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't know Linda very well, but I knew Vondas, of course. And when I first moved to Calgary in 1980, so this would have been close to 1980, 81 or whatever. And I was playing with my friend Dave Luker, drummer, who probably was doing some stuff at Central at the same time as me and Dave Rice. And a bass player that not too long afterwards moved to Vancouver. I kind of keep in touch with him through Facebook, Mick Woodhouse, and Bill Summers, piano player. Maybe Pat remembers him. I don't know.
I remember Bill. Yeah, I used to jam with Bill at Chaos.
There you go.
He played trumpet too,
and he played the trumpet pretty good too.
Yeah.
And we scored a 2-week gig in Lethbridge at a restaurant during happy hour. It was 4 to 7 or 5. I think it was 5 to 8. Doesn't matter. So it wasn't a late night, And of course, we were all young. We're freaking super keeners, And this would have been right around the time of the end of the term. So late April, March, late March, maybe early April. So we're doing this gig, and they put us up in a hotel and stuff. So of course, the keeners, we're looking for places to practice during the day. So we end up at the University of Lethbridge at the time. It was pretty freaking new. So we scope out the music program, the music department, beautiful practice rooms, pianos in all of them, and so we thought, oh, this is perfect. Maybe we could, spend some time in the afternoon shedding here and then go to the gig. So we wanted to do it right. So we went to the office and, told them what we were doing, why we were in town. And they said, yeah, you're welcome to, it was a different time, right? You're welcome to use this stuff. If a music student comes along and wants to room, you got to leave. We're like, yeah, we're fine with that. Well, because it was after the term, I guess there was nobody around. So we're in there, we're playing the piano and practicing and shit and having a grand time. And I meet Vondas. And so he starts recruiting me to U of L. Because when I left Montreal, I hadn't finished my degree. I just wanted to play. And he showed up to our gig, I think with his wife at the time. And he's given me the huge sales pitch, and I'm seriously considering it, but I'm thinking, all right, I just moved to Calgary. I want to play. I'm starting to establish myself, starting to get my name. If I leave Calgary to go to Lethbridge, forget all those contacts. I'm done, right? So I decided to not go. So fast forward to the end of August, and of course, through the pro band at the time was rehearsing at the University of Calgary. And then doing their gigs, you know, at the Horn Toad Lounge at the Delta, whatever it was called. And I'm there warming up one morning, and I see Vondas in the practice room at UC playing the trumpet. So I knock on the door and I was like, "Hey man, it's good to see you. What's going on? What's up? What are you doing here?" And I embarrassed him. It was priceless. I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, I left Lethbridge. I'm teaching at University of Calgary now." And I said, "Really?" I said, "So you gave me the hard sell recruiting pitch to go to U of L, and had I gone, I would have gone just because of you, and you wouldn't be there." Oh man, he got red in the face. You know, he was laughing and shit. You know, and then that was the beginning of the beautiful friendship. You know, he was a very important mentor to me, and I remember hanging out with him one time at UC. And two things. My oldest brother was a school teacher, and when I started to get into teaching, and Lael can relate to this, and maybe Pat a little bit, but my brother told me there's two people you need to make friends with: the secretary and the janitor.
Yeah.
You want to be best buds with those people. So I filed that away, which is true. You know, you're messed up, or you lose your keys, or you forget your keys, or whatever. The janitor's going to help you out, you know, and you're effed up with whatever in terms of paperwork. And if you're best friends with the secretary, she's going to help you out. It was very good advice. And I remember, I can freaking picture it, man. It was on the second floor of the music department at the University of Calgary. And Vondas and I are walking down the hall, and the secretary, I forget which one, it might have been Doe Dyer, remember her?
Yeah, Doe Dyer, yes.
Okay, it might have been her.
Yeah.
And she's coming the opposite way. And me and Vondas are walking, and we're chatting, and Vondas goes, "Excuse me a minute, Greg." And Vondas stops and he goes, "I just wanted to say, Doe, that your dress looks lovely today." And she's like, "Oh, thank you." You know, we keep walking, and Vondas turns to me and he gives me this freaking grin. And I thought, yeah, man, schmooze the secretary.
He knows it. Yeah.
He's got it figured out.
Yeah. Well,
I've never forgotten that, man.
I had mentioned when Central went to Quebec City in '85. At that point, I had determined that I was going to go study post-secondary. And lucky for me, when the concert band was playing and being adjudicated, Vondas Miller was one of the adjudicators. So I went up and talked to him afterwards, and I said, "I have every intention of coming to UC next year." So he really helped make the transition for me from high school into university a lot easier. So he wasn't my advisor. Stan Finn was, but he was.
What? Yeah. Who was your advisor?
Let me get closer. It was Stan Finn. There you go. So
well, he was a sweetheart.
Yeah, he was.
I can remember doing ear training with Stan.
So did I.
Me too.
And he'd play like a perfect fourth and say, "What is that?" And someone would say, "Perfect fourth." No.
He'd say, "No, listen again. Listen again." He did that to me too.
And we'd all guess.
He's like, "No, listen. Can't you hear that? Can you not hear that? That's a perfect fourth?" Like, yeah, I'm sorry, man. Yeah, sorry.
Oh my gosh, the three of us have the same story.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a killer wardrobe, eh?
Mm.
Remember, it was all like super high end. Name a high end.
Armani, Gucci.
No. Like Yves Saint Marie or something like
Yves
that.
Saint Laurent.
Yves Saint Laurent.
Yeah. But like
Pierre
the
Cardin
shirts and the Cuban heeled boots but all like vintage, top of the line,
right,
from the 70s.
Well, you know, I have to give him credit because when I started sitting in places, it was him that kind of started it because he knew that I was, you know, wanted to do a lot of the jazz stuff. So he said, you know, on a weekend when you're not doing anything, why don't you come down to Cannery Row and sit in with me and Hazel Proctor and and Mike Broadley and all the guys that were at Cannery Row at the time. This would have been the mid 80s. So I went down, I took my Barry sax down and I sat in, and that's where I met all those guys and gals and started sitting in places. I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll try going to some other places now too. But it was him that kind of extended the invitation to me, which was very cool.
Well,
I didn't expect that from a prof.
No, and that, you know, that's exactly it, right? Like he was so connected. Maybe not so much when we were going through there, right? But his history with the Calgary music scene is huge.
Well, and then when I started doing the grandstand show, Stampede Grandstand show in '93, he was the conductor for it.
Yep.
And I did the grandstand show from '93 to 2009, I think, or 2010. But he was a few my first chunk of years that I did the show. He was the conductor.
And he had done that for years, right?
Yes.
Like I think he was doing that back in the 60s.
Yep. So just so you know, we're at 3.5 minutes before this session expires. Just so you know.
We got a lot to say, man. I remember sitting in, or maybe being on the gig at Cannery Row with Stan, and you know, as he was starting to lose his hearing, I forget what the tune was, and he's playing the tune, and I'm listening hard to him, and I'm like, he's freaking making the changes, man. He's nailing them. And at the end of the tune, and everybody was kind of like, you know, and he kind of picked up on that, and he turned to me. He said, "Did they say E flat?" And I said, "No, actually they said B flat." He's like, "Ugh." So in the wrong key, he was freaking playing the chord. I could hear the chord progression of the tune. It was just in the wrong key, you know. So he certainly, well, you know, such a long career playing music. He knew what the fuck he knew what the heck he was doing. But
yeah, I'm not going to edit that out, by the way.
He was losing his hearing, the poor guy. And I think we have time for this. When I was doing the master's thing at U of C, which was somewhat of a disaster, but it was okay. And we're in the listening lab, and all of a sudden we hear this high-pitched whine. You know, not super loud, but clearly audible. And I made a joke. I said, "Oh, frick, it's Stan's hearing aid feeding back." And it turned out it was. And I was really embarrassed. He was a sweet guy. I was sorry to hear of his passing, but he was a good guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was my faculty advisor all the way through, like whatever. Vaughn just got me in the door, but then I was handed off. So,
and Stan would, when I had to do the remedial theory test for the master's thing, you know, and he'd mark my Bach chorale writing, and when I would end on a major seventh at the end of the Bach chorale, he'd circle it and put "not part of the style." I'm like,
I did that in one of Alan Bell's classes. I had this voice, and I just voiced a major seventh at the end. A big red circle that said "not characteristic of the time." And I was thinking, okay, but doesn't mean it doesn't sound good. It still sounds good. But anyway, yeah. Okay, we're at 1 minute. We got more?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I'm cool to keep hanging out with you guys. I'm having a good time.
Hang for one more for sure.
Okay.
And I promised my daughter I'd watch Bob's Burgers with her.
Aha.
Right on.
Okay. Well, how about I end this and then I'll set up another one right away.
Okay.
Sounds
okay.
Good.
All right. Sayonara for the moment.